Okay, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jared Johnson. We've got Doug Campbell here with us. And I actually just want to say as few words as possible because Doug and I have been chatting before the recording started, and he may fall into the category of one of the more interesting people in just a few minutes. So there's a lot to talk about, Doug. We're going to talk about markets. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. But why don't you tell us, well, where are you joining us from right now?
So I'm in Yerevan, Armenia. And so the next logical question is how did I end up there?
I think logical question number next for most people is, remind me where Armenia is, which I just had to look up, right? So you're way over there, Armenia.
Yeah, and the Caucasus, sandwiched in between Turkey and Azerbaijan, which are Armenia's two rivals, which are on either side of it. And then you've got Iran to the south, and then Georgia to the north.
No problem. Okay, let me derail you for 1 second. How is the food in Armenia?
It's pretty good, with the caveat that any kind of type of local food is very good. So, for example, Armenian food, Georgian food is very good. Anything else, it's kind of a mixed bag. Interestingly, and which is the bad part, so Armenian barbecue is essentially just pork. And they do it very well. I think it's very good. But there's no good steak at all in the country. It's just like it doesn't exist. And I think it's the same in Georgia. I don't know exactly why this is, but I hypothesize that they use a lot of the cows that they have actually for milk. They eventually kill them when they get old and sell them for the meat, and they use the steaks from that, and it doesn't taste good. There's like the one thing that I'm missing the most about America is like American beef. I mean, I love steaks. I don't know. I thought about it would be a good business actually to import cattle from the U.S. probably here and then make like actually tasty ribeye steaks out of it. It would be like, but then it's like it's a small market. There might be some environmental factors, like, there's not as much maybe grass and vegetation. I think the air quality is kind of bad. So maybe there's some environmental factors why they can't have good meat in this. But it's actually true. I don't know if you've been in Europe or Eastern Europe. Russian beef is also not that great. I think in Europe in general, it's not really that good. I mean, I haven't had as much steak in all the other countries in Europe. But I kind of feel like
it is kind of it's a funny topic because I've been through Europe quite a bit, and people always say, even when you're in Western Europe, right? They're like, oh, this like grass-fed, all natural steak in France, and I'm like, it is like a piece of leather, like you're gnawing through it. And
yes. So I don't even try to order steak. I mean, I guess you probably could buy something imported, but yeah. I mean, that's exactly been my feeling too. And it's kind of, I mean, probably it would be a good startup idea to just bring better.
But maybe there's not a market for it. Maybe they like their leather steak. So,
Yeah. I mean, so actually the way that they cook beef historically in Armenia, which is actually not a bad dish, is they will just like boil it. Like they'll boil it with potatoes. And this is like one of the national dishes, and there's nothing else to it. And the beef gets soft because they boil it for so long. And it's not that bad. It's okay. It's edible.
That's wild.
So what's funny and not funny about this is that they eat this particular dish when someone dies. They eat this particular dish. And another thing, when someone dies, there's actually like 8 funerals where they eat this particular dish. So actually, unfortunately, my wife's grandfather had passed away this year. So I got to eat a lot of this boiled meat potato dish.
Wow.
I mean, I'm going to rot in hell for laughing about this, but
I was going to say, sorry to hear about your wife's grandfather, but it's kind of the opposite here, in the U.S. now, right? You guys over in Armenia have 8 funerals, and every time my wife or any of her friends has a birthday, there's like 8 birthday parties, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Can we just let's celebrate and move on? But no, that's cool. So back to your so you're in Armenia. how'd you end up there? What brought you there? You're from Indiana originally, and ended up in a spot that not many Americans, I would say, are probably living.
Yeah, not at all. It's just basically totally random. So at some point, I think when I was younger, I wanted to do what you're doing, manage money. And then at some point, I decided, no, I want to become an economist, do academia. I had worked in D.C. a little bit during the Obama administration, and actually for the Democratic National Committee targeting elections. But then once I finished my PhD, I just kind of applied for whatever academic job I could get. This job opened up in Moscow, Russia, and so I was like, okay, I'll try it. I'd heard good things about Moscow. There's a lot to do in the city. Back in the day, the nightlife was probably on par with like London or New York or something.
Wow.
It's a very interesting, fascinating place. And I actually think Moscow is incredibly underrated as a city on like a number of different dimensions. So it was a great place to live until it wasn't. And so then eventually the war started, and immediately after the war started, I left. I bought a ticket out. And then on my flight out, Canada closed its airspace, and the airplane I was on turned around.
Oh.
So I woke up from my flight, and I was back in Moscow, like a nightmare. So I had to get out again. And so it's kind of scary because at that point, all of these, like the land routes were closing up, and all these countries were closing their airspace to Russian airplanes.
Yeah, were you getting concerned? Like, am I going to be able to get out of Russia? Or
because once I got back, there was like no tickets available. Like I would search like the next day to buy another ticket, and I couldn't find a single ticket out of the country. And then I finally bought one for like 3 days later or something, through like Kazakhstan. And it got to be ridiculous. And I had actually just started a new company. I just gone public with my own prediction market, Insight Prediction, and we launched like 1 week before the invasion. And the key market we had up is, will Putin invade Ukraine? And that week we'd actually done more volume than either Polymarket or Kalshi, the two other prediction markets that are now pretty famous and now are both unicorns. And so it was kind of not a great time, not a great time for me to be leaving. So anyway, I left, and then at some point, I had money in Moscow because I still had a faculty professor job there, and so I came back for banking reasons, and met my wife, met who's the woman who's now my wife, and then. We had moved back at some point for a little bit, partly for banking reasons, partly for other reasons. And this January, we had been vacationing in Bali. We flew back to Moscow, and I was unceremoniously deported from Russia, interrogated for like 8 hours by FSB agents. I was made to record a confession-style video where I said that I supported the SAO, and that I did not support the government of Ukraine, and all this stuff. And so I was deported, banned.
So you're doing all this stuff. You can't get out of Russia. You get caught by all the border patrol, everybody. In the back of your mind, are you like, I'm about to become a statistic, and I don't know how I feel about that? Or are you just like, I mean, you're in the hands of who knows what's going to happen, right? And
I was kind of a mix of like I just gotten off a 14-hour flight from Bali, where we'd like woken up super early to catch the plane, and then I'd already been in the airport for like 6 or 7 or 8 hours or something like this, and so I was like beyond exhausted. And also just like on some level scared shitless, but like so tired I didn't know what to think. And then, so we were trying to call people up, and like maybe we could have, had it not been so late, there might have been people we could have called that maybe could have helped us out in the moment. But it wasn't, it was late, and so we got deported. later we tried to ask kind of friends of friends who were kind of well placed in the Russian government to help me out. And eventually, I think now the mood in Russia with everyone is that nobody feels super secure. And nobody in Russia wants to kind of go up against the security services and imply that maybe the security services made a mistake or wrong. And so eventually what my institution decided was, okay, no, we can't, because this happened for political reasons, we can't employ you any longer. So as of 2 months ago, I'm no longer a professor, but I'm not that bitter about it. I'd already kind of moved on. I had started a prediction market a few years ago, and I've kind of fully transitioned past few years into becoming a full-time trader, mostly on prediction markets, but I do some crypto and oil and some other stuff too.
So you lived in Russia as a professor, got out by the skin of your teeth, ended up in Armenia, and you're no longer a professor, and now you're running your own prediction market.
Well, yeah. So the prediction market that we started, it wasn't that successful. And essentially the problem we had was I didn't have a lot of capital. So this was self-funded. And then it was a prediction market and crypto exchange. We had been using FTX as our bank, kind of like as a white label solution. And so when FTX went belly up, they went belly up with like if you valued at the current valuation of assets, it was in the low 7 figures. But of course, then at the valuation at the time of bankruptcy, it was much lower. And so after that happened, after that shock, like punch to the stomach, I was like, okay, I'm scaling down inside prediction, and all of our depositors, obviously, their funds were secure. I had enough capital to cover everything, but it was enough of a financial hit that I was like, okay, screw this. I'm going to go. At the time, I was like, I'm going to go back to trading, because actually I'd funded the money. I'd funded the business from trading, especially during COVID. And then so my intuition was, okay, I'll go back to trading and I'll make a bunch more money and then maybe start something with that. And then over the past few years, I kind of just realized that, look, Kalshi and Polymarket are so well funded and financed, and Polymarket just raised another $2 billion or something.
Yeah, from ICE, from the exchange owners.
Yeah. And so
tell me this. Tell me this real quick.
Yep.
Your trading of choice during kind of COVID, early 2020s. What were you making all your money on?
Yeah, so I bought a bunch of put options when the pandemic hit. I thought this was probably going to go viral, COVID would, and it did. I shorted oil, and then later in the year, I was actually quite ballsy. I didn't really mind taking a lot of risk then. So probably I would never go this deep as I did, but I basically took half of my net worth and I put it on Biden to beat Trump. And fortunately, I did that in Bitcoin also. And the other half of my wealth, I bought a bunch of oil calls. And so my logic was that the COVID vaccine was going to work probably. And I'd kind of calculated that they should get statistical significance with the Pfizer trial around like the first or second week of October of 2020. And then what happened was, for political reasons, they did get statistical significance around that time, but they delayed the results until after the election because they didn't want to help Trump. And unfortunately for me, during that time, oil just got hammered. And my oil calls on election night were down like 90%. So I'd taken half my money and I was down 90%, and the other half I put it on Biden. And at some point, when the first results were reported, it looked very good for Trump. There was kind of like this red mirage, and then they started to count more like absentee ballots and stuff later in the evening that were more blue, and so there's this big blue shift. But there was like one point in the night when the markets just went all in on Trump, and I thought I was totally broke. I thought I was like done. But then it turned around, and Biden ended up winning comfortably. And 2 days, maybe a day or 2 days later, Pfizer announced like very good results, and oil just started to go on like an 18-month rampage after that. And so I made a bunch of money on both of those. And then the other thing was Bitcoin went from like 20,000 or like 18,000 on the election day or something like this to like 60,000. And the website that I bet on, they were kind of delayed with the payout. And so by the time I got paid out, Bitcoin was well on its way to 50,000 or something. So that was that was like a 6-to-1. And some of the oil calls, I guess, from election day, it increased in value like 50 or 60-to-1 also. But unfortunately, they'd gone down a lot before that.
So you crushed it on both. You made a bunch of money in oil, and you made a bunch of money on the election. Yeah, so if you thinking about the prediction market side of things and just everything, if you right now were like, okay, I got to go back and make a bunch of money trading, what would you be trading?
Well, right now, I mean, I did pretty well in this last election, but I didn't quite take as much risk as I did back in the day. I mean, I like to sleep at night, and like back when I was trading, I think 2020 election, I think there was like 4 or 5 nights where I barely slept, at all. It's because I was so worried. Yeah, exactly. I've got a baby on the way. I'm married now. Even I made the mistake with this last election of kind of telling my wife that there was an election going on, and she woke up and she was kind of nervous. So I'm like, damn it! It's like probably the baby, our baby could feel it, inside her belly that she was nervous about this bet I was making, and I was like, that's too much. But I actually didn't take as much risk as I could have, but ended up doing pretty well on this last election. There's all kinds of stuff to trade on in prediction markets. I guess it's pretty good right now because it's a growing industry, and there's a lot of fish coming in, new bettors who are maybe not very sophisticated. I also think it's very interesting and it's very fun. Maybe even so much fun that it can be a little bit addicting to gamble. Lots of interesting topics. You can bet on anything. And there's lots of, I think it's very interesting to think about what kind of financial market adjacent prediction markets there can be. So
it's an interesting spot with, I was talking to someone else on the podcast about prediction markets, and and apparently I'm aware and watching the prediction markets, but I wouldn't say I'm very involved at this point. And he was saying they don't like to say bet because we're not betting, we're not gambling, right? I said, okay, feels like it, but okay. And I mean, do you think they're like in your own prediction market, participation, are you doing anything like outside of, say, elections and financial markets? I mean, are you betting on, I think I saw, was it Polymarket or something that there was actually a $1 million bet right now rolling that Jesus would come in 2025, right? I mean, obviously it's getting out there. So, I mean, are you trying to stick with like elections and financial stuff, or are you going deep into all the things that can be bet on? Or
really, every month, the range of topics I bet on is extremely broad, and so just it kind of depends whatever I get interested in. it used to be that prediction markets were small enough that if you wanted like a liquid market that's trading somewhere near 50-50 and resolves the next few weeks, you usually didn't have much of a choice. Maybe there'd be one market or two markets that satisfy those criterion. And now there's a bunch of different markets, so many that you can't go in all of them if you want to be an expert on the market. But
what's the craziest thing you bet on in the last 30 days or 2 months? What's the most, I don't know what other word I can use, out there kind of bet that you have placed in the prediction markets?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see, what interesting markets have I well, so I'm betting on so I bet a lot on the war. I bet heavily that Trump would not fire Chairman Powell. And so I guess in recent months, so one good strategy is whatever Trump is consumed with is usually a good thing to bet on. So a big one was, so one example, because Trump can say something very confidently, but if you read between the lines, you might realize that it's just total bullshit. And so, yes, I didn't think he would actually fire Powell, and he didn't. So that was a good one. And that actually might be one where you could have made money. Instead of trading the prediction market, you could have traded the actual financial markets, because I think that the stock market did sell off at some point when it looked like Trump would fire Powell. Another one was, during the Israel-Iran war. At that point, I also did want to trade oil. I got too tired and didn't do it. Instead, I longed crypto. Basically, after the U.S. hit Iran, and it was clear that Iran was going to strike back, and I felt that Iran was not going to strike back with much force. I felt like they were going to do some kind of token response, and so I bet on them not to close the strait near Iran, and I made some prediction market bets. But then I also went long, levered long on hyperliquid on Bitcoin, because I felt like the financial markets would respond once it became clear that there was not going to be a broader war between the U.S. and Iran. And then I also wanted to long or short oil, and I didn't get around to it. I just, it's one of the bad sides of being in Armenia is that it's already like 8 or 9 p.m. by the time the markets are open and going. So
yeah.
So it's just not convenient. So I didn't do that. Another prediction market trader I heard did do that and made like $400K trading oil just around this thing, which is kind of like, I think it's most of the kind of sharp prediction market traders kind of had the same idea how this is going to play out. And so he's just smart enough to say, no, I'm not going to bet on prediction markets. I'm going to bet on financial markets too. And it went pretty well for him.
So it sounds like in the prediction market space, and this is maybe a logical, like, yeah, no kidding kind of a situation, but if you're, I think the prediction markets will probably attract a lot of just people wanting to gamble, for lack of a better word, right? Just, hey, can I bet on whatever sporting event? Can I bet on, anything, right? Let me just place my bets on anything happening. And that's obviously going to be a very sporadic, gambly related outcome, right? But what you're talking about is more akin to kind of the traditional understanding the markets, trying to place a very well thought out position on your hypothesis, right? And so I can see why they're trying to be a little extra careful with who gets access, right? The U.S. is still, I don't think Polymarket you can't use Polymarket in the U.S. besides to look at stuff, right?
Right. I think they will enter the U.S. very soon. So, I mean, now because of the Trump administration, it looks like we're in essentially unregulated period of prediction markets, which might be good and might be bad. And I think it's mostly good, but it'll be interesting. So I think they will enter very shortly.
Where's Polymarket based out of?
New York.
Go figure. They're a U.S. company.
Are both in New York, and then the founders of both occasionally will like see each other out at night. Unsurprisingly, they don't like each other.
So wait, Kalshi is you can use. I haven't even tried to log into Kalshi. Can
Kalshi is legal in the U.S. Yeah, and Kalshi just expanded internationally, and now Polymarket is going to expand into the U.S. In short order. So
excellent,
yeah.
Interesting. So
and also like all the big FanDuel, DraftKings, they're also getting into. They're launching sports prediction markets very soon, even in states that they previously weren't allowed to enter.
The prediction market is running like crazy, and
yeah.
I mean, speaking of predictions, and all puns intended, do you think that the prediction market will? I mean, in your view, is it ultimately going to overtake maybe the popularity of the typical financial markets for the retail trader, right? There's a lot of retail traders that are, they're buying Robinhood, they're buying, whatever kind of hot topic stock, looking for the meme trade, looking for the short squeezes. You think that crowd's going to shift over to the prediction market more and more?
I do think prediction markets I'm very bullish on prediction markets maybe the next 3 years. I think it's going to continue to grow. After that, I think we'll just have to see. I think sports, people will always want to bet on sports. I mean, sports is a huge market in its own right. But, I don't know, like FTX back in the day, there was an interview with Sam Bankman-Fried where he was like, FTX, they tried to do some prediction markets and they're like, oh, it did like zero volume. Of course, it didn't do zero volume, but, FTX was doing billions and billions of volume on crypto. And then aside from like the 2020 US election, they couldn't get a lot of volume on any other markets, but it was just like maybe they got $1 or $2 million of volume, and they considered that like almost zero if you're rounding, because they didn't get $1 trillion worth of volume on people doing longing ETH or whatever. So I kind of think that, and I guess now already Kalshi, they've only been doing sports for like a couple of months, and I think sports are 90% of their volume. So the stuff like politics, outside of the big elections, I think it's kind of tricky how you can get, because, providing liquidity in a lot of these markets is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think it can kind of be tricky to seed a lot of these markets in a way that's interesting. I think it can be done. And, how much of the public, how much general betting interest is there in a lot of these markets? I think it's kind of up in the air. So Polymarket does a great thing, which is that, they provide liquidity incentives. And so Kalshi is doing this as well, that really help seed these markets. And so it also makes it so like most people are winners because, they're giving away a lot of money for people to provide liquidity, and then other people can come in and snipe the liquidity when the news changes. And so kind of be like, okay, everyone can make money because of all the incentives and bonuses and all this. And so that kind of helps these markets thrive. But then if you're, Polymarket and Kalshi are losing lots of money doing this, can they actually make money in the future? So I think they can, but I think, I would say that Polymarket's business plan is kind of as like a Web3 Ponzi scheme, right? And so this is like the old, there's like a business model in blitzscaling of like, you want to grow really fast because, some people will value your company really well if you have like fast revenue growth.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can like grow really fast by paying people to use your product. And then, of course, more people are going to use it if you're paying people to use your product. And then it grows faster, and then you can raise more money from VCs, or you can take it public and dump it on retail.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually, you got to switch to, okay, let's try to make money. And then maybe, you stop paying people to use your product. And then, it could be at that point that you can't make any money. People stop using the product, and it was just a Ponzi scheme. Or, maybe network scale effects have kicked in, and you stop paying people to use your product, but they're there anyway because they're used to it. They like it. And so, so maybe that could also be what happens. And then you've just achieved scale effect, and your network effects have kicked in, and now you have a quasi-monopoly or whatever. So that could also be. And then the Web3 part is that you create also some coin or something, which Polymarket, I think, they're going to do an airdrop soon. I think they're going to come out with their own native token. And so I think they could make a lot of money on that. And this could, this could help. So they could I think they could end up finding their own revenue streams. Or right now, I guess they're losing lots of money every day, but they've also grown, and they've found other people to give them much more money. So is it a Ponzi scheme, or is it just blitz scaling and going to achieve network scale effects? It's anyone's guess.
Yeah, absolutely. How interesting. I think there's a lot of development to happen here. I remember 20 plus years ago trading, that was kind of when a lot of retail trading was coming out, and volume spikes were hitting all kinds of places, currency markets, futures markets, and so on. And there was this wild behavior that was happening. And it sounds like the prediction market is kind of in that space, right? It's gonna be developing and kind of obviously normalizing a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see who survives and who gets consolidated. Ken Griffin, of Citadel, said they're not providing liquidity yet to the prediction market space, but they're watching it and they're ready to if it makes sense. And obviously Citadel's a major market maker, and so I think once the big players get involved to that extent, then things will normalize, and that could be a big space. Okay, your top. If you have to place a trade right now, a prediction, a bet, a whatever, top two things. What's the two most interesting bets you see on the board for the prediction market that you would find worth trading?
Oh, interesting. So one caveat is that the election just finished, and I had bet heavily on that. And then I kind of took a break the last couple of days. So one thing I did bet a little bit on this morning, there's a Senate candidate in Maine, Graham Plattner, who was recently kind of canceled. It was rumored that he had a Nazi tattoo. Was it a Nazi tattoo, or was it just like a skull and crossbones? So I dug into this a little bit, and I found that the Nazis had a lot of skull and crossbones tattoos. And some of them just look like a normal Pirates of the Caribbean skull and crossbones. There's a big debate whether this guy, and my take is that this guy is not actually a Nazi, that he had a skull and crossbones tattoo, which it might have been one of the many ones that was used by Nazis at some point, but was probably also used by pirates.
Maybe he was a pirate. Maybe he was just a Hell's Angel. Who knows, right?
Exactly.
Why are we judging this guy?
Anyway, I hate canceling people over this kind of stuff in general. I think okay, let's see what his ideas are. Give the guy a chance. Anyway, he's running against the incumbent governor, who's 77 years old. So not to be an ageist, but I was also. There was this guy who ran against Biden that I endorsed back before the last election, just because my thinking was Biden's just simply too old. He's too old to be president. And so I think this guy has a chance. Maybe not. He's been kind of the big liberal media has tried to cancel this guy. So maybe he does get canceled and voters don't go for him. But I think he's kind of like, he's got a very masculine heartland vibe. And I think it'd be good to have, if the Democrats can put up this kind of candidate rather than what they normally put up. And so that one might be a little bit based on hope, or I mean, you should never bet your politics, but I think he's got a decent chance. I think the odds should be at least 60 or 70%, and I think I got it at about 50 cents this morning. What's another good one?
That is wild. That is super interesting, and I think that's probably you got to do your research, right? You got to dig and you got to find out.
Absolutely. That's
everything.
All about. Yeah.
It's
so
all
one
about
of my part of the reason I made this bet, I had just bet on successfully on Jay Jones to win the Attorney General race in Virginia. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but this guy had also gotten canceled. I think for somewhat dubious reasons also. It had come out that in a private text message, he had said what looked like kind of an aristocrat style joke where he had compared like the Speaker of the House, some member of the House of Delegates who he didn't like. He had made the joke, said something like, if you had that guy, a member of the House of Delegates, Pol Pot and Hitler in a room, and you had two bullets, I would give both the bullets to that guy. Right? But I don't think he was seriously thought this guy is worse than Pol Pot, right? It's just nobody would think that, but this got out there that he wanted to kill this guy with two bullets. And this is also like right after they came out with this, right after when the right-wing influencer was shot. Right, so it's like they kind of tied it to that, and it really hurt this guy's poll numbers. But I was kind of thinking, some of this poll numbers might be social desirability thing, where people don't want to admit that they would vote for a guy who said he, was going to put two bullets in some other guy's head. But then in the polling average, he was only down like 1 or 2 points, and there was a huge number of undecided voters. And so it kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you remember, like the polling in like Michigan and Wisconsin in the 2016 election, when Hillary was up like 6 points on Trump, but actually he was up. And so everyone like ganged up on the pollsters after that. But what the polls actually showed in like Wisconsin was that Hillary was up like 46-40. And there was a bunch of like undecided but right-leaning voters who just hadn't made up their minds yet. And so there's like a huge number of undecided voters. And so if you realize that like, okay, you've got a large number of kind of Republican-leaning voters who just haven't made up their minds yet, and Hillary's only at 46 or 47%. She was not really in a very good position. Particularly after the Comey letter, even according to those polls. And so this kind of just reminded me of that. And so I bet on this guy at like an average price of like 28 to 30 cents. And so I got better than 3-1, although I kind of paper handsed it and I sold some of it. I took profits on the way up. But this one ended up paying off. That the voters didn't see this as quite as big a deal as the media did. And it was kind of a similar situation in that there was a lot of kind of Democratic-leaning, undecided voters, and a lot of those came back into the fold, which is kind of predictable.
Interesting stuff. Tell our viewers where they can follow you and kind of learn more about what you're doing. What's your X account? Do you have a newsletter? You publishing anything?
Yeah, I'm on X at Trade and Money. And so also, in addition to being a trader, I developed kind of a pro trading terminal for Polymarket. So those viewers who are interested in trading on Polymarket seriously, I think one thing you'll find is that the Polymarket's UI is not very good. So it can be very slow. there was one trader during the last election who made a mistake in a market, and then he tried to sell out of it, but the sell button on Polymarket's UI wouldn't work. And so he just got screwed, and he lost at least $20,000 on this trade just because the website kind of just stopped working. That had happened to me before last year during the Biden-Trump debate. The website, there's just so many users who were on the website that the website just totally shut down. And I had position on Biden to win the nomination. I couldn't sell it because the website wouldn't work.
Oh.
And so shortly after that, I decided, okay, I'm going to build my own trading terminal, which uses the API to trade, and now it just works flawlessly. It works so much faster. There's a lot of things you can do with the trading terminal that you can't with Polymarket's UI. So
cool.
Yeah. So if just DM me on Twitter and at Trade and Money, and then
we'll post the links below so everyone can find you and follow you in those spots. But that's great stuff. Thanks, Doug, for joining us today. It's super interesting stuff. I think the prediction markets are growing like crazy, and it's certainly a hot topic right now. So that's really cool stuff. We appreciate you being on all the way from Armenia. I know it's middle of the night practically for you now. So thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you on in the future as these prediction markets keep growing.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.